Hi, I'm Alex. So I'm the Director of Learning and Development at KCA Training, and we do lots of training in education, as well as many other areas. And today I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. We're going to talk today about the impact of stress and uncertainty, and we're also going to think about how to support ourselves, how to support children and young people that we may work with as well. So let's get going. So, we are going to look at stress, what it is and its impacts. We're going to look at uncertainty and its impacts. We're going to look at stress as a contagion. We're going to think about what we can do to support ourselves, think about what we can do to support children, young people, and we're going to end on focusing on the importance of connected relationships. So, stress then. So, stress is our physiological response as an organism to anything that's challenging to us. And stress can cause you to feel unsafe. It can cause you to trigger into a survival response. It can impact your behavior. And we've actually got three different levels of stress. And I think it's really interesting to know about the different levels of stress because even though they're there and they're very clear, they're very personal to us as well. So we may feel everything as a certain level of stress, or we might go through these different levels depending on how we are in that moment at that time. So the first level of stress is called healthy stress. So this is those everyday challenges that might be a little bit uncomfortable, short-lived. We can recover from them ourselves. We can, as we call it, self-regulate through them. Now, when we have healthy stresses, it's great because it builds our resilience regularly. Now, the next level is called tolerable stress. So, tolerable stress is more prolonged, it might be more excessive. I like to think of it a good example being when you're stuck in traffic. So, if you are really resilient, you've had a good night's sleep, you're feeling well, you're having a good week so far, there's not been much stress coming your way, you can cope with getting stuck in traffic because you talk yourself through it, you co-regulate, you self-regulate, sorry, through it. So you can say, oh, do you know what? It's out of my control. There's nothing I can do. I just need to relax. You might breathe a bit deeper. You might put some music on to listen to, and you get through it. You self-regulate through it. Now, if you're more vulnerable, so it could be that you've already had a lot of stress that day or that week. It could be that you're poorly. It could be that you've not had lots of sleep that night. Getting into traffic then feels much worse. So it's much feels much more excessive. You might be feeling hot and bothered. It might really overwhelm you. It might whiz around in your head. You might be feeling really bad that you might be late. You might be overwhelmed by the whole experience of it and not able to self-regulate through it. Then what happens is when you do reach work, you get out of the car and you almost instantly find someone else to say, I've been stuck in traffic. It was awful. And they co-regulate with you and calm you through it. And recovering from tolerable stress also builds your resilience. Then we've got toxic stress. Now, toxic stress is overwhelming. So it's either going to be that tolerable stress that you couldn't self-regulate through, but then you couldn't find that person to co-regulate. So it goes on for a much longer period of time. Or it could be something. So it can be an event or something that happens that instantly goes to toxic stress. Now, toxic stress is overwhelming for us, for our brains and our nervous systems. It sends us into fight, flight, or freeze. It sends us into survival mode. And we need someone around us to co-regulate with us. So toxic stress, you can't self-regulate through. So, thinking of stress, there are many things that can cause stress, many things that could trigger us into going into toxic stress. And so, we're going to think about one of those things today, which is uncertainty. So, uncertainty has impact as well. And human brains really crave predictability. They crave certainty, especially when you think about children and young people. That predictability, that certainty, we're sort of wired to crave that. And so when it's not there, it can cause stress, it can cause anxiety, it can cause levels of fear within us. And the human brain perceives uncertainty as a potential threat. So when we can predict what's going to happen in the future, we can prepare for it. We can prepare for it in many different ways. So if there's a shift and a change, and suddenly we aren't able to predict what's going to happen in the future, then we feel unprepared for it. And if we're not prepared for it, then our brain and nervous system thinks this might mean there's a threat. There might be a threat to life here. It can trigger us to go into fight, flight, or freeze. It could trigger us to have a real need for control. It can trigger us to really crave safety. And Children and young people especially need predictability in their lives. They need predictable adults around them. They look to us for signs of safety. They look to us for signs of certainty. So the children and young people that we work with or live with will look to us. So when they can sense something might be going on, maybe they've seen the news, maybe there's been conversations of things that are happening, they will look to us. They will look signs that we're okay, signs that we're feeling safe. So this is why today we're looking at both what we can do to support ourselves, but also what we can do to support children and young people, because we need to support ourselves first, because all of the signals that we're going to be showing to children and young people through our facial expressions, our body language, will give those signals of either safety or not being in safety. So, when we're thinking of stress, when we're thinking of what might trigger us to go into stress, like things such as uncertainty, it's really interesting to think of stress as being potentially quite contagious. So our brains and our nervous systems, they're born to connect with other people's brains and nervous systems, which is why, have you ever been with somebody who's been really stressed and overwhelmed and you come away and you kind of feel it in your guts? And at the same time, you could be with someone who's really resilient and energetic and happy, and you come away and you feel really great. It sort of empowers you and makes you feel amazing. And that's because when we're with people, our brains and nervous systems connect. Now, this means that our brain and nervous system influences other people's brains and nervous systems. So it's the same when we're positive as if when we're feeling negative. So those emotional connections that we have very much absorb within those around us. So we're part of connected relationships. So, for example, if you happen to work in a school, it might be that you have a team of adults that you work with, and you may have a class that you work with, or it might be that those children move around. It might be secondary and that they move around a lot. And so you see lots and lots of children. You're connecting with them. Your brain and nervous system's connecting with everybody all day throughout the day. And that sort of stress potentially can connect through everybody. And then there's a feeling of overwhelming stress and overwhelm that's happening within that group. And our brains and nervous systems then get this message from what we see, what we're feeling with that connection, but also the body language of those around us. So that really helps us to think about our daily interactions, doesn't it? Our daily interactions at work or even at home. How impactful our ability to self-regulate, our ability to calm our nervous system, our ability to boost our own resilience. That really impacts as we're connecting with other people. So it's quite a nice reflection to have, thinking, how am I actually right now? Because it could be that you're working with children and young people that you see are feeling really stressed, maybe are dysregulated more often than normal. And sometimes one of the most effective things we can do is reflect on ourselves and think, how am I? How am I actually right in this moment? At this time, how am I feeling? Because if we're feeling stressed, if we're feeling anxious, if we're feeling overwhelmed, then that will connect with all of the children and young people we're working with. So looking after ourselves and really reflecting on that is very important. So what can we do then to support ourselves? Because it sounds all well and good, and sometimes it sounds easier said than done. But there are things we can do to support ourselves. And it's that usual, the usual comment of you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to make sure that you are okay in yourself. You've got resilience there. So some things we can do, we can focus on what we can control. And this is a really important message, actually, because that goes for everything in life. If we're focusing on the things that we can't control, that makes our brains and nervous systems even more stressed. So if we're focusing on the things that we can, whether that be just the routine of what is going to happen today, whether that is in just that minute, that hour, we're focusing on what we can control. Then it's about thinking about how to ground yourself in the present, really be in the present rather than have our minds thinking about the what ifs or thinking about things that we may have seen or heard on the news, or we may have whatever's happening that can distract us from the present. So grounding yourself in the present is a really helpful thing to do. Practice self-compassion as well. It's okay to feel the feelings that you may be feeling. So yes, we're all adults. We are resilient, we are working with children and young people, and therefore we've got lots of skills and lots of understanding and lots of experience. But it's still okay to feel the emotions that you may be feeling. So having compassion for yourself is a really important step. It doesn't help us to say, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this stress or I shouldn't be feeling overwhelmed, because it's just about being compassionate for how you are feeling in the moment. Maintain connections with other people. So one of the things that tends to happen when we're stressed, when we're feeling the impacts of uncertainty, is we kind of tend to isolate ourselves. That's sort of human nature. When actually that's the opposite of what we need. What we need is connection. What we need is to maintain the connections with the other people that we've already had, to nurture those connections and ensure that they still happen. And we need to use self-care, self-care to build our own resilience. We need to be actively doing the things that make us feel good. Um, this image here is called the Resilience Hot Air Balloon. So this Resilience Hot Air Balloon is quite a nice thing to think about when we're thinking of building our own resilience and how we do this. So the sort of it's an example of 4 things that we can do regularly. We think of the word pies, not just eating pies, because I'm sure that does build your resilience. But the P stands for physical. So something physical that we can do. So whether that be a gentle walk or whether that be, yoga, or it might be that we do football regularly, whatever it might be, it's keeping up doing that we do physically for ourselves. I is intellectual, so learning new things, reading, Sudoku, whatever it might be that we enjoy doing is really, really good for our brain and nervous system and building our resilience. So you could count today on this being on this session and watching this as your intellectual, hopefully. Then we've got E. So E is emotional. So that is linking very much to that, having that self-compassion. So thinking about our emotions. So it could be journaling. It could be watching something that we know is going to make us cry. That's actually really good for our emotional intelligence and our emotional well-being. It could be talking to that person, that person that you might go and have a drink with, and you set the world to rights and you feel amazing afterwards. So that emotional work is really important. And the last one is social. So the social very much links in with that maintaining connections with other people, ensuring that you do go to the staff room at break time and get that coffee, even if you're just there for a couple of minutes and you manage to say hello to a few people. It's making sure you're maintaining those connections with others. So the reason we've got a hot air balloon in the middle is because the hot air balloon represents us, and it represents our resilience and our vulnerability. So the idea is this is a bit of a metaphor, and the basket at the bottom is our vulnerability. It's the things that are weighing us down and making it harder. So when there are times when we are more vulnerable, so it could be we're feeling poorly, it could be we're overwhelmed by what's happening in the news, that weighs down our hot air balloon. So therefore, we need to add more things to the balloon, because the balloon part represents our resilience, and all of those things, the things build our resilience, make it bigger, and that lifts us up. That makes it easier to go through each day. And a lot of the time, we're already doing these things and we don't realize it. So the last thing you want to do is go, oh, okay, physical, I'm going to run a marathon, intellectual, I'm going to do my doctorate. Don't put huge expectations on yourself. It's just those regular small things that you can do that fit in either of those categories, really good for boosting your resilience. Resilience is really about how you cope with stress. So that links very much to the stress that we talked about in the beginning. If you are resilient, you will feel stress more likely as an everyday healthy stress and less likely as either of the other two. So, what can we do to support children and young people then? So, there are many things we can do to support children and young people. And it's not necessarily about healing from and recovering from what has happened. This is thinking, although that is what happens, but what we are thinking about is buffering. So, this is about buffering the impact of stressful things and uncertainty as they are happening. If we buffer the impacts, we are building their resilience as well. So, some examples of things that we could do: we could model being calm ourselves. That's incredibly helpful. We can establish or maintain consistent routines because remember, the brains, especially of children, young people, love consistency, love predictability. We can have open communication as well when we're thinking about feelings and validating those feelings for the children and young people. We can teach focusing on the controllable. So, what can we control? Which very much links in with what helps us as adults as well. We can encourage connection with each other because children and young people are the same as us. When they're feeling stressed, they might want to isolate, they might want to move away from their friendship group. So, encouraging that connection and supporting that connection is really helpful. Physical activity is brilliant. It reduces stress hormones if they're there. So if you think about the hormone cortisol, for example, it comes out in your sweat when you've sweated from exercise. So it's a really positive thing to do. So keep peeing going, add in extra things if you can do. Limit media exposure. We obviously only have, again, when you're thinking about what you can control, if you're thinking about children, young people that you work with in an education setting, for example, we can only limit that exposure whilst they're in the setting, but that's a really helpful thing to do. And use play and use art to express feelings if it's needed. But I would say play and art are really therapeutic anyway. And I've got a few examples here of the things that we can do with play and with art to express feelings for all sorts of ages. So there's the basics, there's the kind of things you can do which talk about emotions. So you can do the art, the creativity about emotions, and there's so many different age ranges that you can do. This is just an example for the little ones. You can do designing and drawing and any sort of forms of art, but with a theme. So this one was the theme calm, which is lovely. We've also got the theme chaos here. So letting children and young people be able to just express what that theme means for them is a really helpful thing to do. Then we've got small world. So small world, especially for younger children and primary age children, can be really helpful. And actually, even up to, I'd say, year 6, it can be a really helpful thing. Those small world activities can help children and young people to sort of play out scenarios as they're happening. And it gets used a lot when we're thinking about social stories, for example. And that can be a really, really helpful thing for people to do, for young children especially. Then the sports. So activities and games that get people outside, get them moving their bodies, really, really helpful. And drama, so acting things out. So you could use it with younger children when they're just acting out an emotion. And that can be beautifully done in so many different ways. Or you could have different scenarios that people act out and feel and see how they would respond in that scenario. So there's so many different things that we can do, which really help children and young people during times of stress, during times of uncertainty. So when we think about all of this, one of the sort of golden threads I would think is connected relationships. And connected relationships really do matter for everybody. We all need to be part of a network of human brains and nervous systems. And communities like schools are built by these networks of connected relationships. And connected communities buffer stress and the impacts of uncertainty. And that's because there are so many people who are there able to co regulate when it is needed. They're able to support everybody through any challenging times. And it keeps our brains and nerve systems really happy. It makes us feel safe and it makes children and young people feel safely held by those around them, which is incredibly important in times of stress and uncertainty. So we'll finish there for my slides. I do actually have, there's this QR code on the screen, which is access to a free resource from us, which is that resilience hot air balloon that I showed you earlier. It's a well-being activity. It's a really lovely activity you can just do independently on your own, or I have worked with lots of schools who have taken it back into school and used it in staff meetings or small group meetings. So there's a free activity for you. And I'll hand over to Eleni again if there's any questions from anyone.
Thank you so much, Alex. There's nothing in the chat yet, but I've got a couple. Just on the hot air balloon, to start with. I just wanted to. Would you say that is something just to be used with staff, or is it something that could be used with children or young people as well?
I think it definitely could be used with children and young people. And I think it's how you go about it. So you could use a hot air balloon on its own just to talk about vulnerability and resilience and what that is. If you don't want to use the words vulnerability and resilience, you could talk about what makes us feel good, what brings us down. And then the pies is really nice as well. I've seen it used in lots of different ways. So I've seen it where small groups have looked at each of the letters individually and talked about what different activities and things would match that. And then I've seen it done all together as pies as a whole. So yeah, there are lots of different ways that you could use it, and helpful for everybody, I would say.
Oh, that's great. I was chuckling around how it's the first time I've heard of a hot air balloon fueled by pies, but I like it. I'm going to really remember it. The other thing that came to mind is, like, I know that we are both of our organisations are supporting a lot of schools and teachers, and by extension children and young people that are currently affected by the conflict in the Middle East between the US and Iran. And so I was just wondering, obviously everything that you've shared is still applicable, but the contexts in which they are currently working, navigating, lockdowns, work, teaching online, recorded lessons, like all of that disruption. Like, is there anything that you've been advising in particular for those circumstances, or anything to kind of add to what you've already shared?
Yeah, I think one of the real keys when there's lots of shifts and changes, and you may think, oh, we're going to be online tomorrow, and then you're in person, or the other way around happens. I would say, and I have spoken to a few people where we've given the advice, for want of a better word, that it's about keeping the connections going. So allowing the children, young people to know and to feel that you're holding them in mind, that you are there for them, that you're still going to reach out and connect, whether that's online or in person. Those kind of check-ins and the check-ins with parents and carers as well just seems to be a really, really valuable thing, because even if you can't give anyone any answers and you can't give them definitive yes or no's to questions about what's happening next, just being there and showing that you're there for them really helps settle nervous systems and helps people to know that they're safely held. And it's really tricky because the adults, everybody is feeling stress, is feeling that uncertainty, and it's impacting everyone's nervous systems and brains. And so it's about regulating yourself as well and allowing yourself to be resilient enough to do those connections with everybody. But that's one of the main things that for as human beings that we'll crave, it's that connection. Yeah.
Yeah, that really resonates. And again, I think when you were speaking about the balloon and resilience, and one of the challenges, I guess, in those situations is that the toolkit that you are used to drawing on, not all of that is available to you in those circumstances either, isn't it? So it's about finding new, again, this tool could be helpful for recognizing, okay, well, that's what I'd normally do. Maybe I can't right now.
Mm.
What could I do that's close, or is going to something else that's
Mm.
going to be easier?
Yeah. And trying things out as well, I think can be really helpful. Just testing something out, if you can't meet that person you normally go for a walk with once a week, that can be really positive in so many ways. If you can't meet up with them and spend that time with them, it's exploring other things. So it could be, let's try and do this, I don't know, online yoga class together and be on a call together, or let's just have a FaceTime and see if that, just testing out these things and seeing what feels good, and trying to make it as close to what you normally do. Is a really helpful thing, because sort of cutting it out and just saying, well, we can't therefore do anything similar, that's even trickier. And then it's trickier to go back to when you can as well, because your brain gets used to the new norm quite quickly, and so then it's even harder then to reach out and say, let's go for those walks again. But yeah, so just testing things out and having a go, even if you don't really feel like you want to, because you know that it's going to be really good for your brain and nervous system. So it's sort of pushing yourself a little bit to try these things out is really helpful.
Yeah. And I think, just I've been thinking a lot as well about the schools that have been getting in touch with us in the UK as well, and how asking us a lot of questions about how to support um, children, young people here who are feeling, so they're not directly impacted, but they're
Mm.
obviously very conscious of what's happening, and the indirect consequences of that on
Mm.
lives here in terms of the cost of living and the concerns, the stresses that they are very much feeling
Mm.
in their everyday life as well. And I was just thinking about that point around the play and the art type activities that you shared, and whether you've got any advice on how to. So I'm sure that everybody kind of watching this has done lots of those kind of activities before. I guess what I'm interested in is, sometimes we don't feel like very clued up or confident about how to like follow up those conversations. Do you
Mm.
know, like, so you stimulate the
Mm.
activity, but then dependent on what comes out of it, like, what's your advice for taking kind of a trauma informed approach to
Mm.
follow extend
Yeah.
those activities into kind of meaningful conversation?
Yeah. I'd say compassionate curiosity is the key. Being able to be compassionate and empathetic and validating emotions as they come out, and but also having guidance and support in ways that you can, um, is really helpful way of being, because it helps us to not panic. You know, if a child works on something and maybe you've chosen the word chaos maybe, and you're working with some teenagers, and someone's really gone for it with the art, and then they want to talk about this feeling of chaos that they have, or that overwhelming feeling they may have. I think it's important to validate that and say, absolutely, we all feel that sometimes. We all do. And it's really important just to recognize that we're feeling that, because it's not that we necessarily have the answers and say this is what can stop that feeling, because that's not necessarily where we need to go. It's just about validating that and understanding that, and say, yeah, absolutely, we all feel, we're all human beings, we all have the capacity to feel all of these emotions. And what's really positive is that you're able to name that emotion and understand what that is within you, and that's a really positive thing. And it's tricky because I think people worry about, if deeper conversations and things might come out. So it might be that linking up with pastoral teams and being able to say, this is an activity that we're doing. So it may be that if you've already identified a child that you think maybe would need some more work afterwards, it's having that in place or having that ready just in case, because they might not need that. And it's knowing that we are not there to do therapy or counseling. We're not there to unpick past traumas or ACEs or anything like that. It's about dealing with that emotion in the moment and giving that positive connected relationship in the moment. And when you're trauma informed and you're attachment aware and you understand how stress impacts on our nervous systems and our brains, it's a way of being where you're just keeping that connected relationship, you're validating emotions, you are putting in guidance and support where you can. And through that, then that child is safely held, which is a really important thing for someone to feel. And it's about not being scared to do it and just having a go, and even trying it as an adult. I mean, I've done it before where we've had a team of staff and we've said, right, actually we're thinking about doing this new way of thinking about emotions with the children that links in with our art. So we're all going to do it first. So we feel what it's like to do that. And quite often afterwards it'd be like, wow, that feels really good actually. I feel great. I didn't think I'd feel great, but I do. So yeah, it's having a go at that as well can be really helpful.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alex. It's been great, so interesting, and really appreciate the time that you've put in sharing your expertise in this on this topic. Do you want to just finish off by just sharing a bit about what KCA do and how to get in touch with you if
Yeah, could do. Yeah. So we are a training organisation, and we do training and consultations with lots of different areas, but mainly in education. So from EYFS to up to 25 years old. And we do training in lots of different areas. So training in things like trauma-informed practice, attachment awareness, core needs such as belonging, well-being, emotion coaching, so many different things. Staff well-being is a big one as well. So if you want to get in touch with us, just do a little Google of KCA training and we'll pop up. I don't think it's coming up with your free resource, but you will see at the top of the free resource, it's got the website. So you can then cut and paste that in to get directly to the website. But yes, if you're interested.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And yeah, as I'm sure everyone can appreciate, you can see the great alignment between what we seek to support schools with and what KCA also does. So yeah, looking forward to us working again together at some point too. Alex, thank you again.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much everyone for joining as well. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.